Hi, I'm Joe Whitney.
And I'm Bridger Howell. We'll be explaining cuckoo hashing and visualizing it as we go. The first thing to understand about cuckoo hashing is that insertion is similar to other hashing methods, being expected to be constant depending on how good your hash functions are. However, lookup with cuckoo hashing is much better, being constant in the worst case rather than constant in the average case.
Cuckoo hashing uses two hash tables, each with their own hash function. The hash functions determine the position of an element within that table. To insert an item, we insert it into the first table. If there is already an item there, we move it to its corresponding position in the second table. If there is an additional item in that position, we move it to its position in the first hash table. We repeat this until either we successfully insert or we reach a set number of iterations, which indicates an infinite loop. In this case, we rehash by finding all new hash functions and reinserting all of the items. In this diagram, the arrows indicate where each element will go if it is kicked out. For the simple insertion, we insert 2 into the first hash table, and there are no conflicts. Suppose that 10 is in the second position in the first hash table. We insert 2, kick 10 out, and insert 10 into the first position of the second hash table. Now suppose that 11 is in the first position of the second hash table. Like before, we insert 2, kicking out 10, then insert 10, kicking out 11, and insert 11 into the first hash table. It is possible that when you insert an item, it creates an infinite loop. For example, when we insert 2, kicking out 10, it kicks out 11, kicking out 1, and so on, we eventually end up back in the same position that we started at. After a set number of iterations, the computer detects that there is an infinite loop and rehashes.
To search for an item, we just look in both hash tables according to their hash functions. For example, if we look for 2, we first look in the first hash table where 2 would be, and we find it. Now suppose we're looking for 10. We look where 10 would be in the first hash table. It's not there, so we look in the second hash table, and we find it. Now suppose we're looking for something that isn't there. We look where 6 would be in the first hash table. It's not there, so we look in the second hash table. And it's not there either, so we conclude that it's not either. It's easy to show that searching is constant time in the worst case. However, it's not as easy to show that insertion is expected to be constant across all of the insertions. To show this, we first want to show that successful insertions are expected to run in constant time. For this, we found that the probability of kicking out more than a given number of items is bounded by a decreasing exponential. When we take the expectation of this exponential, we find it to be a constant, so the successful insertion time is bounded by a constant also. Secondly, we want to show that the total cost of rehashing is expected to be constant across all of the insertions. The key here is to find that the probability of a rehash for a given insertion is O of 1 over n squared. Then from that we can deduce that the probability of a recursive rehash is O of 1 over n, and thus only incurs lower order terms. Then if we multiply the cost of rehashing times the probability of rehashing and the total number of items we insert, we find that this amortizes to be constant across all of the insertions.
Some of the limitations of cuckoo hashing include that many of the common hash functions can't be used because they perform rather poorly. This includes the multiplicative class. In addition to this, hash tables should always be kept less than 50% full, otherwise performance of insertion drops drastically. Also, rehashing may be too expensive of an operation for some applications.
Lastly, the literature has suggested many improvements to cuckoo hashing. The first one is the most obvious. We just keep changing the size of the hash tables so that they're together never more than 50% full, guaranteeing good performance. Secondly, we can generalize cuckoo hashing for more than 2 hash tables. Doing this dramatically decreases the probability of needing to rehash for a given insertion and allows hash tables together to hold more items. Lastly, with stashing, when you would normally incur a rehash, you instead insert the offending item into a constant size stash. Then when you need to search, you look through both tables and the stash. This dramatically reduces the number of times you need to rehash.